Now arrives the hour of action.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it.
For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury.
To subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws.
All experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
And we're going to take our country back from these people.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Marches Live. I'm sure you saw the ad for tonight's show. We are a little bit early from what the ad said, but it looks like you all are coming on pretty fast. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Mr. Hallett. Thank you, Holly. So, the guest tonight from the Fox 17 investigative report, as you know, is Tori Harper, along with our very own Connie Reguli. And I'm going to bring them right on because we're running a couple minutes late and we're all short on time. So let me bring you guys up here. Transition. Welcome, Connie. Welcome, Tori. How are you?
Great, Ted. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. It's been, I think, 3 or 4 months since you were on the original show.
Yep.
I feel like you have a different, like you moved your computer a little bit. No?
Mm-hmm.
Just me? I don't know. I pick up on these things. I'm super visual, so. All right. So where, and Tori, I mean, I can't say, to get this started, I just want to tell you, you know, I am so impressed with your courage coming out and being comfortable enough to not just make a Fox 17 report, but then go deeper down the rabbit hole, if you would, into the community that I'm part of, the family law reform community. Your story is incredibly heartbreaking. I have a tendency to go forward before doing my opener, but I mean, the feeling I got when your son's, you described your son holding your hair, and then the bald spot was just pure devastation. The first probably 24 times I watched that, it would bring, you know, make me well up a little bit. It's just horrible. And how you stumbled upon this situation is horrible in and of itself. People have this understanding that that things are here to help them. And
Yeah.
and you know, in telling any story, there is some sort of beginning and end. The system we are trying to end relies on the intimate personal details of your life to destroy your life, knowing that the chances of you wanting your entire life plastered all over the internet is low. This is how they alienate and intimidate you into submission. And if you had not found Connie, not only would we not be talking, but the chances of you being with your boys is low.
Very low.
So, you know, this chapter of your life brought on by a system we are, trained to believe exists to help, to the vast majority of people who don't see through the beautiful guys. Thank you, Miko. You did something wrong. You must have done something bad for this system to incarcerate your children. Right there, you would think that that's a bright, shining light in and of itself, that you are not incarcerated, but your children are. I mean,
I understand that very much, because I would have felt the same way if I had heard the story. I would have thought she did something, because there's no way that somebody could remove children and put them into foster care.
Yeah, it's inhuman.
Unless there's some kind of evidence.
It's completely unnatural. And
yeah. And Ted, I want to say a couple of things. The reason Tori's story is so has so much passion behind it is there's two elements here. You know, I'm an attorney who's done family law issues for 25 years, and I have dealt with hundreds of families in the system, and there are repeated themes in this very, very broken system. And one of the themes is a family reaches out for help or knowledge, or with the expectation that there are going to be professionals involved who have specialized knowledge and expertise with children in very specific areas, where it be physical or sexual or emotional abuse. And then they end up trapped in a system that they find out is feeding off their family. And that's a repeated story that happens over and over and over. And that is, and Tori's family and her story and how they were affected are just the prime example of that. The second thing, and actually that is important about her story that she was able to convey and we were able to put together on the Fox 17 story, was how personal it is. And it was a lot. And Tori was very concerned about becoming public and being deemed as an abuser and being deemed as maybe a family who'd done something wrong. And so, but what is such an important story for the general population to know is that these are real people. These are real stories. These are real little boys. These are little boys with names. These are little boys who are so sensitive to their mother's affection that they have to touch her hair to go to sleep at night. Yeah. I mean, when anybody who's a parent or a grandparent or who have cared for children who are the age that her children were, they understand how highly sensitive children of that age are. And yet when we start seeing news stories and things, these agencies, popping up with all the good things that they do, you suddenly, all these people in the world and their children become reduced to a statistic and a number. And so, I've been doing this a long time. I've got a good working relationship with this news reporter. I've reached out to him to help try to cover this issue from a society standpoint. He's got a big heart, and he really, wants to get the real story of people out. And so, and this is, he's done about 4 stories related to sort of these family court issues. And Tori's story, I asked her to do it. I asked her to, talk to them. I asked her, whether her children would be involved. But her story is just touches those elements so strongly and so purely that it's such an important message for the rest of our society to hear.
It is. And, And now that you have the 6 minutes of perfection to throw in the face of any skeptic who says that, oh, you must have done something bad. I mean, they just did an unbelievable job with that. I thought it was. I mean, the story itself lends itself to a perfect investigation. So now you're on the opposite side of the coin. There is us, and similar to the vast majority of people who are still blind by the skies of family law, there are a lot of people, a lot of victims who tend to put their own narrative in every story instead of, trying to continue their self-education past this virtual sound barrier from victim to advocate. Now, I knew those few comments were coming, but I was happily surprised at how few of them there were out of literally hundreds of thousands of views between YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and others. So to me, you seem like a very enlightened individual to not want to badmouth your ex or embarrass him in any way, which would lead to your children getting embarrassed. You understand that could harm your boys. And they love their dad as much as they love you, as much as my son loves me, and the last thing they need is for their mom or dad to be disparaged. So,
and I want to say something,
yes,
if I may.
Of course.
I am pro-family.
Yes.
I am family forward, and I think all parents have an equal right to their children. And that if for any reason, whether it's drugs or abuse or an economic reason why the children are separated, that the system needs to work to help these people keep the families together. So I'm not here to separate that.
Right. No, that's exactly. This is the thing: is you went into this kind of being backed into a corner by your child's therapist. So we heard in the Fox. I don't want to say anything bad about her. That's not my intention. But so in the report, your 3-year-old son says that something inappropriate happened, and he told that to the therapist. So the therapist was saying,
no.
Oh, that's not true?
No, he made a comment to his mom, to Tori, and Tori, in her discussions with her counselor that she was just kind of working with, she made a comment that her son had said this, and he's 3, and she wasn't sure what to do with that. And her therapist said, well, you have to call. Now that I think I'm right, Tori, but tell me, now that I know this, I have to report it, or you can report it, meaning the mom, right? Am I right, Tori?
Yes, we were all in therapy. My kids were in therapy, and I was in therapy because we were going through a divorce at the time. And there were other issues that had been going on unrelated to this that were damaging to our family unit. And my son began disclosing some other things that I was not aware of to me. And just in one of my therapy sessions, I was kind of working through that with my therapist. And she said that because of the nature of what it was, that I had, by law, were mandated reporters in Tennessee, right, and that it had to be reported either by her or myself.
Wow.
And I wanted to go home and think about it because I didn't want to do that right away.
Right.
And so I went home, and that evening, it was pretty late in the evening, I did call and report it.
And so, so you really had no choice. This wasn't so with that in mind, I
want to say, as a matter, yes, I think she did feel that she was put in a position where she had to do that. But also remember that the state of her belief at the time that she did that was one that there was this agency out there who who was endowed with skills and training and professionalism, that they would be able to address those issues at a professional level.
Right.
And that is where we have run into so much trouble, because people truly believe that, and then they get involved and they find out that the system is actually feeding off their family.
Right.
And they get caught in this. And I mean, even Tori, who is, obviously she's not a drug abuser, and, there's no claims that she had been violent, but even her and her trying to parent her children just as a normal mom was being challenged to the effect where they were setting her up so that she could not win. Now, again, as we talk about in the story, she had the resources and she's very smart. She had the wherewithal. She's like, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to take it head on and deal with it. But many people cannot do that. And so they were already setting her up in the system to fail, which is exactly what happened the day they took her children and put them into foster care. Was they had already made a declaration that she was unable to parent the very day they did that. And I want everybody to remember, and I say this over and over and over, the legal standard for removing a child from a home is immediate risk of harm. Immediate risk of harm. It means that we don't have the opportunity to go to court and have a full hearing where both parents can present their evidence, where they can call witnesses to testify and be cross-examined. It is immediate risk of harm. That is the legal threshold. Don't ever forget it.
Right.
And what actually happened that night, or the day that they came to actually do the forensics on my children, and they interrogated me in a room, and they interrogated my ex in a room, they actually asked us, they never accused me of anything the entire time. And they actually asked us to sign what's called an IPA, which means that I was going to voluntarily hand my children over into DCS custody during that investigation. And as a mom, like, my kids had just been through forensics. I had been separated from them for a couple of hours, and I was just like, what are they feeling? What are they thinking right now? There's no way I'm going to, give my voice I was afraid for them and what they were feeling emotionally. So I said no. And at that point, they told me that I was not being cooperative. And it was that I wasn't being cooperative that then led to them saying that I was not mentally stable.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I think God spared me from that experience, because I don't think I could handle it. My first reaction would be to attack and defend my son.
My dad was with me, and he was like, just sign it. He was so worried. Yeah. But I knew in my heart, no way.
So, and this is the thing, and even what your son was talking about had nothing really to do with his dad. It was about a friend of his dad. This is another part that I wanted to clear up with some of these people in these comments. Even that accusation from your son wasn't even against his dad. It was a friend of his dad. Am I correct in saying that?
I really don't want to discuss any of the accusations, just because there's a chance my sons might watch this, my ex might watch this, and we're not gonna go there that really is irrelevant. Because I didn't even know if it was true or not, but I knew my son had told me that, and it was their job to investigate it, which they did not. Right,
and that's just it. What happened, what the allegation is, really is irrelevant here. What is relevant is that you were concerned. Obviously, you wanted some. You may or may not have wanted some type of investigation, but the therapist said, since you're all mandated reporters, this has to be reported to who? CPS.
DCS, yes, exactly.
Or DCS.
And I did want them to look at it, because I, as a mom, have to believe my sons, or at least give that some accountability, because if I didn't, then they wouldn't trust me to tell me things in the future. So I did want somebody that was a professional, that somebody that knew more than I would to look into it.
Right.
That was never done.
Right. And
okay, so let's take this. So really, one of my big concerns is really the next part of this story. Yeah. The part of the story that Tori and her family was able to subvert. And that is what happens once these two little beautiful, if you haven't seen the 17 story, I hope you'll post it in a comment so people can watch it again. But we have these two beautiful little boys who are, just the prime age to be able to be adoptable. And let's just call it what it is. They were prime candidates to be able to place. They're at a young enough age that the system, the new families are able to replace their memories, are able to erase their family from them. They mean dollars to the child welfare agency, right? If either of them acted like they were ADD or had any depression because of being away from mom, they could have been placed on medication. So her beautiful children could have very easily become a product of the system. This is the thing, again, that as we go forward and we go into 2018, I really hope if I can make it happen by any means, and by any means, I mean, it takes resources, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, but to be able to put together a class action lawsuit in behalf of children for being wrongfully incarcerated by the system. And, I don't know. It's kind of like, me turning to you and say, well, would you like to work for the next 5 years with no pay and, put about $60,000 out of your own pocket to be able to do this before you get any returns? So it's a very, very huge, people message me, they post it all the time. They're like, we need a class action. We need a RICO suit. We need a civil rights case. These cases are huge and they're complex, and we cannot minimize the difficulty of those cases. So I can't make any promises, but in an ideal world, we are putting together the Family Forward Foundation as a nonprofit. We've got that paperwork about to be submitted so that we can start look at real fundraising activities so that we can make an impact. The only way that we're really going to make an impact is to be able to get a class action in behalf of children that says that children are being wrongfully removed and wrongfully retained, which is basically an incarceration, and that their civil liberties are being attacked, and that nobody is standing up for their civil liberties, because basically the attitude of the government is we can find a better family for them. We can find a family that is, Tori is very stable. She has a very nice home. But, if they find a family that's having financial instability, or who is between jobs, or who has struggled with addiction, or who has been in an abusive relationship and they're unable to rehabilitate themselves, especially, it's not always women, but it is frequently women, and they're unable to rehabilitate themselves. And the system basically says, oh, you know what? We can find a better family for your children, a better family, a family that lives in an upper middle class neighborhood. Now, to say that, I also want to say, and this is a really scary thought, and you really need to sit down and process this. Let's just take the worst of the worst situations, and let's say that Tori's children got caught up in the system. She was unable to keep up with their demands or get the right attorney or make the right impact. Her children would have then been rehomed into the homes of strangers. And then those people who adopt her children get a stipend, get a monthly support payment for the minority of those children, and nobody follows up with them. Nobody knows where those children are. I am really, really concerned, and this concern has been heightened with me lately when we just really look at the child trafficking issues that are going on, is these children who are adopted into other families, if those families are disrupted for any reason, they can still get that money and give up the child. Do you realize that, Ted? Do you know that could happen? I mean, they could be turning these children over to child traffickers and nobody is following up on it. Nobody. And they still get a check. And the government takes the child's Social Security check. The government expects the parents to pay child support. And I have even seen court orders and letters where they continue to demand child support after parental rights are terminated.
Yep.
After they're terminated. I've got a poor client that is just barely getting his disability approved, and he got a letter from child support that he owes $9,000 in child support that they're going to collect against his SSI. He's never had custody of his child. He's never hurt his child, and the state still took his child and rehomed his child to the third parties. Yep. And his rights have been terminated for 3 years, and they still want child support from him. So the global impact of this, the pervasive crime against humanity is just appalling.
Connie, will you share with everyone while we're talking about it the amount of federal funds that were given to just for the kids that are placed into the foster homes? Because that is just unbelievable. And that's published Tennessee.gov information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How much was it? $176 million?
Yeah. And the money, and what's real clear, you can look at the federal money or you can go to each individual state and look at it. And once you understand what these funds are earmarked for, it's pretty easy to see that the money for foster care and adoption is 10 times the money for family stabilization.
Yep.
10 times.
What is it?
That is undisputable.
On average, in every state, it's about $100,000 a year for a child to have a child in foster care. And
well,
so,
I can't, I have to be honest with you. I can't get that number. I cannot. I've pulled the budgets. Yeah. I looked at the number of children in foster care. I mean, and it's very hard to do because you have Title 4E funds, you have Title 19 funds, you have Title 20 funds, you have all these other grants, you have all these other contractors. So honestly, I mean, if somebody would really drill that down for me and tell me how they arrived at that number. I've heard anywhere from, 60,000 to 120,000 to 150,000. I have to be honest with the public. I don't know what that number is. I know it's 50 or more. And I can do that by just looking at the budgets and looking at the number of children going through the foster care system.
And that's how I come up with these numbers too, is I take everything I can find. And usually I'm finding these numbers because of the show I do on Saturdays, Wheel of Judiciary. And I take all those numbers and I find the median number, which was 100,000 a year. So and that's per month. So 20,000 a month per child. So that's, I mean, the state holding your children, your two boys. I mean, that was an easy $80K for them.
So here's the question that you asked me in the beginning, and what I didn't know before this happened to me. Once you get past the thing of she must have did something and you realize I didn't, then you're going to say, well, why? Why would people do something like that to families? Why? Why would DCS, CPS, why would they allow this to go on? Why? It doesn't make sense. So it can't be right. Well, that's the answer. It's about money.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. The horrible thing about having incentives like this, they're sometimes I'll call them rewards, but it's not quite accurate. And Title 4D brings in a lot of money by judges creating non-custodial parents. Title 4E brings in money by creating foster children. I mean, to put it as simply as possible. So what happens in both? Title 4E is generally juvenile court. Title 4D is family court. And so what we have evolved from a normal justice system in the 90s, the incentives were created in 1997. It took the courts a few years to catch up with this. But really, family court was the first one to start really profiting off of these incentives and making it part of their yearly revenue. And that,
and let me tell you something else, Ted, because I know Title 4D and child support, and I've been an attorney for almost 25 years. And so I saw kind of the evolution of Title 4D. But let me tell you a couple other things that people haven't really mentioned lately that I saw happen. And one of them is VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act. And then the other one is a grant called the Access and Visitation Grant. Now, these are like antagonistic grants, right? Because the Violence Against Women Act grants came in basically saying women are abused, men are horrible, we're going to protect women, and we're going to create all these grants for domestic violence programs, right?
Sure.
All right. So it was only really about a couple years later you started seeing what's called access and visitation grants. And those were the grants that are now saying, okay, well, we're going to create supervised visitation for all these horrible men, right? And all these crazy parents then. And so that grant kind of grew. So since that grant grew, you had to create new categories, which became the women are crazy for reporting the men as abusive, right? And so, I mean, I've seen it. I've lived it. I mean, I've had 1,000 cases. So I've lived 1,000 lives in this system. I understand, and I've seen that evolution. And what's happening is, and if you go back and you look at the history of legislation and these grants, they have just layered one on top of the other, right? Mm-hmm. And so they tend to feed off of it. It first of all, it feeds off of itself, because if you have a grant for a problem, right, you have to continue to have that problem to be able to get the money. Right? I mean, we don't want to fix the problem because that could eliminate the need for the grant. And then secondarily, now that we have a grant for that problem, now we've got this other problem that's been created because of how we've been overzealous in attacking this without really getting to an underlying problem. And so now we add the access and visitation grant. And that's happened. It's just like, these grants for foster children for independent living. Right. So we've got all these foster kids in a system that, we really can't adopt out because they're kind of high maintenance kids that really have mental health issues or whatever. And so we have to create these independent living grants so that we can justify feeling good about keeping these kids in the system until they age out. Now, what do we do with them? They don't have any family. They don't have anybody to support them. They have no one to reach out to. And we're just throwing them out there in the yard. Right. So, this whole system of grants, and I mean, it happens in other places. Like I'm sure it's happening in the EPA. I'm sure it's happening in the prison system. I'm sure it's happening with the space program. I mean, weather control. All right. It's the same theory. We have grants layered on top of each other without anybody going in and saying, now what is the real problem? Right. And that's what we have to do. And we as taxpayers and American citizens have to say, stop.
Yeah, we do. And that's the thing is the juvenile and family court have relied on these incentives so heavily that now it's become a part of their revenue. So if they're looking at the revenue every year, and if you have a judge not generating the same revenue as another judge, guess what? That judge gets fired. Even though that judge is the person doing the right thing, they'll put legislators will appoint these judges to bring in revenue, not to give us justice. And that's what's happened.
And let's just drill down to the actual juvenile court system itself. So one of these grants is called the Court Improvement Program. Okay. There's grants out of the Department of Justice. So you have the Department of Health and Human Services, and you have the Department of Justice. Yep. And so the Department of Justice is giving grants. And for these juvenile courts and for these courts to get their grants, they have to have an increased number of intakes, right? They have to have more cases to be able to justify their grant money so they can build a new courthouse, have new, gizmos in their courthouse, have updated video, and feel real good about all their electronics. So where's that money going to come from? It's going to have from grants, but you're going to have the need, be able to get the grant money, and we have to manufacture the need. We have to create the need. We have to make our statistics look like we have a need, whether we really have a need or not. Right. I mean, do you really, when you look at foster care over the past 20 years, it is consistently 450, 500,000 children. Have we really not learned anything about how to improve families and parenting? I mean, you can go to kidscount.org and you can pick any state in the union and you can drill down to the kids in foster care and do a 5-year history. And you're going to see it's the same number for the past 5 years, very little change in it. So obviously we are not doing a very good job of of helping families and treating families. All we are doing is keeping the children in the system because they are the commodity.
Right.
It's the quota that you have to meet.
It's a quota.
It is. And that's, I need to get you and Mr. Hallett talking, because he's got this amazing emoluments case, which is a step above the RICO. But getting back to your experience, Tori, and we can everybody here has an understanding of your feeling when all of this happened, and then your dad comes on. And man, the restraint that man has really shows his character. It is.
He is like the best person in the world. He was such a good father. Is such a good father. Yeah. They live across the street from us, and like my parents help me because I've got 2 kids that are in different schools. So, and I'm a single mom, so one of them's helping me every day take one of them to school while I take the other. They go at the same time. They're great parents. My dad actually works for the state and has a very, very high up position. So clearly he's background checked and, been drug tested and everything. And my mom worked also for a big laboratory until she recently retired. So they're both very smart, respectable, kind people.
Respectable.
And we've all lived here in Williamson County. I grew up here.
So her dad is like a developer. He like developed half of the county. Yeah. I mean,
he's a civil engineer.
He had relationships with people in government, Department of Transportation, zoning. I mean, he's not just a nobody. I mean, he's people who had connections, who had a place in the community. And, this community that we're in is it's a wealthy community. I mean, Williamson County is ticketed as the 11th wealthiest county in the nation, which is a lot when you think about California and other things. I mean, we have the $1 million homes in this community outnumber those anywhere else in the state of Tennessee. Yep. And yet there's a lot. And so there's a lot of people here that, not necessarily meaning they're rich, so they're better, but they're people who tend to be, that the average is probably a little more educated than the norm of, society. I mean, it's just admitted that it is. And yet in this very community and in this very house where every single positive thing that could exist did exist.
Right.
We still had this problem. And I want to say, when Tori's, I'm on Facebook. I mean, not only do we have the Family Forward Project, which is about 8,000 people, I'm also the member of another group, and it's kind of a private group, but it's like the county. It's not our county, but it's Davidson County, which is Nashville, one county north of us. And there's a group of juvenile court attorneys. And I have to say that Tori's story got posted in that group, and one of the attorneys made a comment that my clients have been calling me all day to find out about this story. And so, it did, a lot of people, and what that tells me is that a lot of people identified with it. There were a lot of people who looked at that and said, look at this. I mean, I'm not just making this up. They're abusing me within the system. And that's the only reason people would do that. Why would they call up their attorney if they didn't identify with the story?
Because the thing is, they really try to get you with that IPA where you voluntarily give them the children. And so then they really don't have to prove anything.
Exactly.
People do out of fear. And then your kids are stuck in the system, and there's so much shame and embarrassment to tell anybody.
Yeah.
I feel that the reason I got my children back were because I did not sign the IPA and because I hired an attorney that wasn't scared to actually look at the evidence and fight against the corrupt system.
Right.
But and even speaking out now after my case was dismissed, this happened to me 1.5 years ago. And it took that long to be able to tell.
It's not easy. What they try to do is alienate you, make you feel like you did something wrong, that you're the only person this could possibly happen to. So I'm getting some feedback on my mic here. So the fact that you know, Connie is in Tennessee. She has these connections with these reporters. I know Natasha Pavlovich is helping you guys with all of this as well as much as she can, you know, creating awareness. And you've got like this amazing group of people in Tennessee in this amazing community, and you're able to tell your story on such a large national platform. And so for anybody watching that, they're going to be like, oh my God, this is exactly what happened to me. I'm not stupid. I'm not the only one. Look at this. It's really incredible, and I feel like the strides made just in that one investigative report can help propel our entire community, our entire movement to an end.
Well, and you know, Ted, there's this theory about everything in life, even if you have not directly experienced it, you have experienced it within 6 degrees of separation, right? Yep. I mean, so for the people, our story has to be, if this has not happened to you, that it's very likely that there is somebody within 6 degrees of separation with somebody you know, or your hairdresser knows, or your cleaner lady knows, or the clerk at the grocery store knows, right? I mean, it is happening around you. Now, how this is a little bit different, I mean, we have serious social issues. We have the opioid addiction. We have the child welfare issues. We have incarceration. We have this child support issues. I mean, the one beautiful thing about a social media platform is that people can find those who have a similar interest in a way we've never been able to do before. Right. I mean, I've been speaking to legislators for 10 years, and I felt like I was alone, and they made me feel like I was alone, right? And I know that during that 10 years and 10 years ago, there were parents who were calling and reaching out to legislators and saying, I'm being abused by DCS. And those parents had nowhere to go. So the very important thing with where we are, we've been working on the Family Forward Project for about 3.5 years and just trying to build it up, share stories, keep the news media going, have some different events. You know, we participated with the Million Parent March in September. So the platform is so important, and people have got to, I mean, I've invited a lot of people to Family Forward Project who are not parents who are directly involved, the people who are legislators. I mean, the people who are members in our group need to go find out who their legislators are on the state and federal level. They need to add them as members to that page, because those legislators are watching what's going on, especially with everything now that's going on in Washington and all the big shakeup that's going up there. I mean, this is a huge blessing to us. I mean, the sexual assault allegations, them lifting up the rug and uncovering everything that's been swept under the rug. It's going to continue, and there's going to be more. And we need to continue to expose, you know, if you go to there's a website called opensecrets.org. Opensecrets.org is where you can find out about lobbyists in Washington. And all you have to do is go there and type in foster care. And there's 114 lobbyists lobbying for foster care. Oh. You know, there are 0 lobbying for the protection of the family. Yep. There are lobbyists who are lobbying for social workers. So the money that is involved, the millions and billions of dollars that is involved in private contract foster care and adoption now is huge. The money for adoption assistance, which is the money paid after the adoption is over, is about to surpass the money that is earmarked every year for Title IV-E. And, you know, these are funds that are never affected by sequester. Right. So if we don't speak up about it and we don't say enough is enough, this is a crime against humanity, the rights of children to have family integrity and to have a healthy family in which the government, if the government is going to put money into reorganizing families, it needs to be to the assistance of the families. It is so deep, and it's so wide, and it's so financially entrenched that these people, we've got to gather through social media, and we've got to make our voice heard. Yep. So, I'm going to say it right now, and, I hope you will empower people as you close today. They need to go to our Family Forward Project on Facebook. You can also, I know you have your pages and your groups as well. There are about 60 different groups. Oh, yeah. Some of them cross over. Some of them have different types of specific agendas. But ours is not about the disparity of saying it's all corruption, because honestly, at the end of the day, the people who are not involved with the system don't want to think that protecting children is corrupt. That's just the bottom line. I've pondered this for, several years about how I address this problem. And I don't address it as a corruption problem. I address it as just a problem of a paradigm that has become so entrenched that we have to educate people to change. So I empower people to become involved with our groups. I empower people to speak up. I've been going to several states. I'm heading to Michigan tomorrow. I've been to Iowa. I've been to Florida. I've been to Washington State. So I've got North Carolina coming up in January. So anybody who'll put together a small group in a state, and I don't care if it's 10 or 12 people, we'll arrange a way for me to come, for me to talk to him. For 2018, I think we're going to look at really developing an advocacy program, a very specific, an Americans with Disability or ADA project about we're going to turn to retailers. And, the one thing that we do have as 8,000 people, we have our spending dollars and we have our vote. That's about all we have. We don't have a lot of money that we can lobby and that we can give to politicians to vote our way, but we have our spending dollars. And these retailers give millions of dollars away every year for social programs. And we need to be the social program. Yes, so we have got to make that noise, and we've got to organize in a way to make that happen.
Right. You go to Walmart, you go to the gas station, there's always something like the latest thing down at the, we don't have 7-Elevens this far north. I think it's Cumberland Farms, but they have one of those things for $1. You get a circle, you put your name on it, and it's something battling child abuse, which is great. But I'm like, so what's the organization? Is my first thought. Does it have anything to do? Like, I have to research the background of these orgs, making sure that they're not profiting off of 4D money or that grant money.
And look, let's be real. These companies have hired huge PR firms. Yes. Okay. To be able to get, Wendy's and Chick-fil-A and, Mattress Firm was like collecting something for foster children, right? Weird. And so there are huge PR firms talking about the wonderful work we do as in fostering. So we need to start making our voices and our dollars count.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great idea. I haven't heard anybody say that, but that was a thought, would we have eventually our own lobbyists as, family lobbyists? What's right for children have a fundamental right to both parents equally above the state. I mean, could you have a lobbyist pushing that on people, saying, look.
Well, so, lobbying is an interesting thing. I mean, lobbying is lobbying, but here's something you have to have. And I learned this, many years ago when I just started going knocking on doors of legislators. As soon as you walk in the door, they want to know, who are you with? And so you've got to have one of two things when you walk in the door of a politician. You've either got to have money or you have to have numbers. Okay. Yeah. So you can't just go in and say, I'm lobbying for the rights of parents or the rights of children. And when I was in Washington in 2016 in February, it was my first time up there sort of doing an informal lobbying campaign. And I took a couple other people with me to walk around and walk in these offices. And here's the first thing I would say to them. I would say, hello, my name is Connie Reguli, and I'm here today representing a grassroots group of over 8,000 people who want child welfare reform. And so I had coming out of my mouth before I ever talked about a donation or a contribution or what I could do for them financially, I was able to talk about numbers. And so that is why we have to have numbers. That's why the National Rifle Foundation has a voice, is because they have numbers. Yep. And so we have got to build our numbers in an organized fashion. And that's what I challenge people to do in 2018.
That's great. And obviously, if there's anything I can do to help, you know where to find me. And Kirk's Law Corner, we talk about the common law Mondays and Wednesdays. If you could jump in on one of those shows with him and Chris, that would probably be an amazing conversation. But I know we're probably running out of time, but before we end, I just want to get an understanding from you, Tori. So you find Connie. What was the final thing? Like when the day your boys came home, that first day, did it happen the moment the judge said, okay, return the children now? Or did they try to hold them back for a couple of weeks? Yeah.
Well, what happened with that? I had an attorney before Connie, and something was not right with what was going on there. He was not defending me at all. And he was saying, you just need to follow DCS's recommendations. You need to follow their orders. We would go in for a hearing. I never got a chance to speak. And he would just go up and talk to DCS, and they'd come back and tell me what was happening. And I was eventually like, this is not going to work for me. I need somebody else. I had heard of a case that Connie had represented, and I looked that case up because I knew she was somebody that wasn't afraid to speak out and fight, and I knew she would fight for me. So I called her up, and I mean, the day that she took over my case, and she had to ask the judge, Judge Sharon Guffey, to recuse herself and step down because of another case that was going on. That is the day that Judge Guffey signed my dismissal.
Wow. Congratulations, yeah. Connie. I was just telling Wheel of Judiciary people about recusal.
Well, actually, before that, DCS dismissed it first because they knew they didn't have evidence, and they sent it to Sharon Guffey, and she wouldn't sign it until right. Connie eventually had to do that.
Because Connie has a reputation in that area. I'm from a richer town, Dartmouth College, and so I understand, a community like that, although it might not be super supportive because everybody's doing their own thing, but you wouldn't think that these things would happen there, that there could be a judge taking it upon herself to destroy that very community. It seems unreal. And then obviously you have two different types of attorneys. Some people like Connie, and then you have the people who, and Connie may be slightly more expensive because she doesn't get that bonus from the courts. Some attorneys get stipends from the courts to practice. Those attorneys are cheaper, unfortunately, and those are the attorneys that people who can't afford an attorney use, but they can't really battle the court without the court saying, oh, we're taking that stipend away. Good luck. So, the question that I keep seeing popping up here, obviously, is if you can't afford an attorney, what do you do? And until we get the lobbyists, like you said, there's really... All right.
Well, okay, so let me say something about that too. And there are a couple states who do it a little bit different than Tennessee, but Tennessee and most other states, all the attorneys that are appointed for parents are appointed by the judge, okay? Right. And the judge is the one who signs off on them getting paid and, whether or not they're going to serve as a guardian ad litem or as a parent's attorney. Sometimes if they get a court appointed for a guardian ad litem, the judge will have the state pay and then order the parents to pay too. So she's really in total control of that checkbook. That's another power that needs to be removed from the court.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I support is basically an Office of Independent Counsel. And that Office of Independent Counsel would be the one who would manage those attorneys, who would select those attorneys, who would train those attorneys, who would oversee, maybe give some amicus support, and so that who'd sign off on their fees, so that is totally removed from the as far as the process from the judiciary. I think the court, should probably go ahead and look at the affidavit of indigency and make a decision whether or not an appointment is appropriate as a judicial officer. But as far as who takes that appointment, how many hours they invest, what their training is, how they parents, and I've got a horrible case that I haven't been able to represent this mom because the case is just so in such a bad shape by the time I found out about it, and she just can't afford to have me unwind it. But she's had a horrible attorney, and her attorney has refused to do an application to the Supreme Court, and her attorney withdrew without giving her notice. And so, she's facing a deadline, and she can't even get a new attorney appointed because she would have to go to the trial court to do that. And those parents have no place to report that is occurring.
Right.
So, that's another part of the system that needs to be modified and revamped.
Yeah, there needs to be a group of people, the public, watching over these things, so this stuff can't happen, and people who are indigent shouldn't be taken advantage of just because they can't afford. And I think maybe you were talking about Christina, I don't remember, the Mountain Sisters.
Christine Radcliffe.
Yeah, Radcliffe. Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't know if she's been on your show before or not, but I was talking about Nicole Flatt.
Oh.
I don't know if you're familiar with Nicole, but she's been to the Court of Appeals twice and had court-appointed attorneys and had a horrible decision come out against her that made no sense, and knowing the facts of her case made no sense. And then her attorney ducked out, and she's got a Supreme Court deadline that she can't make. So,
and
it was just kind of
person.
The end of the road.
With all the money that's being channeled in, what my biggest problem with this whole thing is how they can remove a child with an ex parte. Like DCF can just go in front of a judge and say, this lady's not cooperating with me. And I think she must be crazy because she's not signing her kids to me voluntarily. And that they can remove a child, in my case, for 2 months, and I was lucky, while they investigate the situation. There's no jury trial. I never even got to speak. No evidence was presented. I did present it to DCS, but they don't look at it and they don't care.
Right.
And that's what I don't understand. It starts there. The money would never come if they had to prove it. Right?
There's a lot of things there. You didn't do anything wrong. You went to them. It's not like they came up on your doorstep with a warrant. And
this could happen to anybody.
Anybody.
And that's scary.
And once you're in there, their burden of proof is very low. Their burden of proof is perjury, and they're getting away with it.
They don't even have to have any for an ex parte.
Right.
No proof.
Exactly. It's their word is their burden of proof. Nothing. Your burden of proof to get them out is how much money did you spend? I'm not gonna know. Don't answer that. But how much, the time, the money.
You're innocent in this type of court.
For you to prove, your burden of proof is the destruction of your life. It can't happen. It shouldn't be happening. It's like
and there are things that are just so bizarre to me. Like, now they impugn parents for not cooperating with the department, right? That's one of their big things recently. Yep. And so, they go knocking on your door and you go like, I don't really want to talk to you.
Right.
And then they leave with no evidence. Other than a call that could be a random anonymous call of somebody who doesn't like you, they can go to a judge and they can say, well, we received a referral that the kids are dirty when they go to school and don't have their homework done, and the parents won't cooperate with us. And the judge will take your children away. They will take your children away.
based on that.
So, and the petition, I've got 2 of these cases right now where the underlying petition filed by DCS doesn't even ask for custody. They don't ask for custody, and that judge still took their children away from them. And, you know, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, if you're in a car wreck and you go file a lawsuit against, let's say, Ted, we're in a car wreck, and I file a lawsuit against you for damages because we're in the car wreck, and we go to court, and the judge says, Mr. Fogg, I'm giving Connie your house, right? I mean, you'd be like, what? She didn't even ask for my house. I've seen that happen twice in the past 4 months.
It's incredible. There is no stand. This is exactly what Sessions was talking about in his address to the nation 2 weeks ago. The lower courts doing whatever they want, creating laws however they want, whatever their personal beliefs or guidance documents treated like statutory law. It's complete insanity, and a lot of us have been discussing Sessions' speech. I did a whole show about it, breaking it down, you know, editing out what he said, and really how it applies to the lower courts. And I think that we're moving in the right direction. I really do.
Well, it's going to take it's going to take a tsunami. It's going to take a tsunami. I mean, there's no question in my mind. And, you know, and I want to share one other thing, and I'm not like a huge, great historian, but there are certain things in history that are I have a marked attention to. And in 2011, the American Bar Association writes a journal. And in 2011, they had this article about Nazi Germany. And they talk about, this whole article is about how in Nazi Germany, everything that happened was legal. And what happened is they passed these laws that allowed for the internment of people. And then within the court system, the attorneys who were against it were impugned and disbarred and were cut off from making money. The judges were were appointed by an aristocratic society who would support the government, whatever, make rulings in favor of the government. And the only attorneys who were really left were the attorneys who would support that type of a procedure. And I've seen that. I've just got to tell you, I mean, I've seen that in the practice of law. I totally get that. Attorneys who stand up for right and wrong, and the attorneys who say, you know, that's not squeaky clean to me. That just doesn't pass muster. You know, that whole constitutional class we had back in law school, there's something about secret reports. There's something about lying in petitions. There's something about taking your children on an ex parte that just doesn't smell right. Those attorneys are impugned, and they're very rare. It's so rare somebody who'll stand up against that. Yeah. So, you know, we're in a crisis. We are absolutely in a crisis as a civilized society. And I just beg and pray that people open their eyes and see it.
Yep. It's the greatest civil rights disaster in humanity, because it doesn't affect one race, one gender, one political affiliation. Well, what LaShawn K. Ford said is this has the potential to bring all of humanity together. For the first time in history, because it only makes sense. I mean, ending the system is good for humanity, and it isn't biased at who it affects. It rich, poor, black, white, you know, Muslim, Christian. But
the attack of the family in the court system has become an industry all of its own. I mean, through the Court of Appeals, 1/3 of the cases in the Court of Appeals are family-related issues. Now, think about that. That's every case, every type of case, auto accidents, not bankruptcies, but auto accidents, estate cases, contract cases, property cases. I mean, everything that you can think of that's ever filed in a civil lawsuit, criminal cases. I mean, everything that you can think of. Family-related cases are 1/3 of those cases.
Wow.
That tells me that the entire court system, not just the child welfare system, but the entire court system has an industry of keeping families tied up in the system. And I've seen it. I've seen divorces take years in certain jurisdictions that are just totally unreasonable.
Suicides, for instance, have just gone over 1/3 to almost half of all suicides are directly related to family law.
Right.
Children being the number one.
I've lost 3 moms in the past year to suicide. Not
God.
Personally, but all cases I've been associated with in some manner. The moms couldn't take it anymore, and they overdosed. And and they're all young. They were all 35 or under.
It's horrible. All related to family law, and really a lot of this. Well, we you know, I know it's 7:08. You have somebody you have to pick up from the sitter in a couple minutes. So, Ken, the day you saw your boys, well, we can end with this. For the first time in that 2 months, what was that like, knowing that it was finally over and you had them in your arms?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you, because I want to say like it was the happiest day of my life, but it was a very sad day because they looked like they had just lost their health. Like my oldest son, his like the light in his eyes that he has, like he's the kindest kid in the whole wide world, was just black. Like his eyes were just black. And my youngest had the bald spot, and they looked unkempt. Like you know, they were wearing clothes that weren't theirs, that weren't their sizes. And so there was a lot of hurt in those first nights, and like we all slept in my bed together and just kind of like held each other that whole night. And both of my sons had vaginas.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was challenging, and it's taken a long time to get to a place of like, I can't believe we walked through that, and we made it out, and we're okay.
Right.
But in the beginning, when families are reunited, there's joy, but there's a lot of pain and a lot of sadness because you hurt for your child what they will just went through.
I can't even imagine. Like I said, I don't think I would probably be a statistic if somebody tried. I don't think I have. Like I said, your dad, his restraint, it was absolutely incredible to me. But you could feel you could just feel it, how horrible it was. You know, great guy.
And you know that they told the boys after they took him from her. After they took him from their granddad, you know, your granddad needs a break from you. I mean, it's like.
Yeah, the brain starts right in the beginning because they have to tell the children something of why they're being removed.
Lie to them.
And in the first couple of weeks that I had my son back, my oldest and my youngest would say, like, our other mom. And I'm like, you were only there, like somebody was telling them that, you know? Oh.
It's horrible. So now we're a year and a half or so past this. Grades are back up. Family structure is normal. The divorce and everything. You know, I'm sure there's co-parenting and all of that. So moving forward, how do you see your boys from this experience as far as how they were affected in the future? Do you think they're going to be able to recover relatively well? Do you think this will have a lasting effect into adulthood? Or I know that's a.
I think we are all forever changed by it. Like our lives will never be the same. I mean, my oldest is very, very mature now and just very sensitive. But we're Christians, and I believe in God, and I think that He can heal anything. And day by day, we're healing, and we're getting stronger, and we have a voice now. And that's very, very empowering. And to be able to help others, I think that heals.
Our voice is growing too. You know, day by day, I see more and more people talking, more and more live feeds. And then this situation with Fox 17 and you and Connie and Natasha and that website, judgesharonguffey.com. Please, everybody go check that out. And this isn't the last story they're going to do. They're going to help you guys put out more stories to the public, right?
Yeah, and every time I share my story or one of the other girls shares their story, people do message us and they say, this happened to me. And they're so afraid that no one's going to believe them because they've been shamed. Like I have people, sending me their documents, even saying, help me, just look at this. Like I'm an innocent person. And it's very, very just heart-wrenching.
We need a hashtag.
How authentic this is.
We need a hashtag.
Like Me Too. Like the Me Too thing that happened. With the Me Too, there's hashtag Me Too for women who have been raped, maybe families who have gone through this. Hashtag My Family Too.
Mm.
That way, people who are too scared to talk could at least hashtag it.
Mm-hmm.
An idea just popped into my head. But before all right, so Connie, any last words before we get going?
I'm just going to say I've tried to share it several times here, and some people have posted back. It's bounced back on not available, so you will repost the show after it's completed, right, and put up the entire live show. So
and here is,
that would be great.
There's a picture of Family Forward Project right above your head, and I'll put a link to that group in the comments right after this, and I'll keep sharing that too. And I think I shared this video to that group, to your group. It's one of the 3 or 4 that I always share to. Hope that's all right. But thank you, Connie, for your time. Thank you, Tori. I really, really appreciate that we were able to put this together. Wasn't super easy, Connie's a very busy attorney. Tori is a very busy mother, even with help. Thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And we'll end this right now. And if you guys want to stay on just for a second, I'll end the broadcast, and then we can say bye after it's over. Thank you, everybody at home, for watching. I'll go back through and look at the comments. Thank you for sharing. You guys have a wonderful night.
You too. Good night.
Good night.